One conversation changed everything. One smile made him question 10 years. One choice destroyed the life he'd built and saved the man he'd forgotten to be. Ryan had always been the kind of guy who followed the rules. Wake up at 6, gym by 7, office by 9. His life ran like clockwork, and honestly, he liked it that way. For 10 years, he'd been with Lisa, his college girlfriend. They'd built a comfortable life together in their Seattle apartment. Weekend brunches, movie nights, plans for a wedding that kept getting pushed back because, well, there was always more time, right? But comfort can be a strange thing. It feels safe, warm, like a blanket on a cold night. Yet sometimes, without you even noticing, that blanket becomes so familiar you forget what the cold feels like. You forget what it means to feel anything sharp or real. Ryan worked as an architect at a decent firm downtown. Most days blended into each other. Draw plans, attend meetings, go home, have dinner, watch TV, sleep, repeat. He wasn't unhappy, not really, just there, existing in the space between contentment and that nagging feeling that life was passing him by. Then came that Thursday evening in October. His firm was redesigning an old gallery space in Capitol Hill, and the opening night showcase was mandatory attendance for the design team. Ryan almost didn't go. He'd had a long week, and the thought of making small talk while sipping cheap wine sounded exhausting. But his boss insisted, so he put on his one good suit and drove over. The gallery was packed with the usual crowd. Art collectors in expensive glasses, local artists trying to network, people who looked at abstract paintings and nodded knowingly like they understood something profound. Ryan grabbed a glass of champagne and found a quiet corner, already planning his exit strategy. That's when he saw her. She stood near the center of the room, talking animatedly with a small group. Her dark hair was pulled back loosely, and she wore a simple black dress that somehow looked effortless and elegant at the same time. But it wasn't her appearance that caught his attention. It was the way she moved, the way she spoke with her whole body, hands gesturing as she explained something about the painting behind her. There was an energy about her, like she was fully alive in a room full of people just going through the motions. Ryan found himself staring, which wasn't like him at all. Then she turned and their eyes met across the room. She smiled. Not a polite social smile, but something else. Something that felt like recognition, though they'd never met. Something that made his heart do this weird skip thing he hadn't felt since he was 17. Before he could overthink it, she was walking toward him. "You look as thrilled to be here as I feel," she said, her voice carrying a slight accent he couldn't quite place. "French, maybe? Let me guess. You're with the architecture firm?" Ryan nodded, suddenly aware he'd been silent too long. "That obvious? You keep looking at the ceiling structure instead of the art," she laughed. "I'm Isabel. I'm cataloging the private collection for the next 3 months. Came over from Paris." They shook hands. Her grip was firm, confident. And maybe he held on a second too long, or maybe she did. The moment stretched, became something neither of them acknowledged but both felt. "So," Isabel said, still holding her champagne, "are you going to tell me about the ceiling? Or should I pretend to care about this painting that's clearly just someone's emotional breakdown in acrylic form?" Ryan laughed. Actually laughed, which felt foreign and good. "The ceiling's original from 1924. They want to preserve it but add modern lighting. It's a nightmare, technically." "See, now that's interesting," she said. "Tell me more," and he did. They talked about architecture, about the challenge of honoring old buildings while bringing them into the present. She told him about her work, about traveling from museum to museum, never staying anywhere long enough to collect more than memories. She spoke about art like it was alive, like every painting had a heartbeat. An hour passed, then 2. Ryan forgot about leaving early, forgot about the other people in the room, forgot for just a moment about the life waiting for him outside. When Isabel reached for a catalog on the table between them, her hand brushed against his. It was nothing. An accident. People bump into each other all the time, but Ryan felt it like electricity, like every nerve in his body suddenly woke up and paid attention. "Sorry," she said, but she didn't move her hand right away. Neither did he. Finally, someone from her team called her over. The spell broke. "I should go," Isabel said, "but this was nice. Really nice." "Yeah," Ryan managed. "It was." She pulled out her phone. "We're doing the catalog work on site. Maybe you could show me around the space sometime." "Professional consultation." He should have said no, should have made an excuse. But instead he found himself typing his number into her phone. Driving home that night, Ryan kept both hands on the wheel, eyes on the road, but his mind was somewhere else entirely. He kept seeing her smile, hearing her laugh, feeling that brief touch that meant nothing and everything. Lisa was already asleep when he got home. He stood in the doorway of their bedroom, watching her peaceful face in the dim light. They'd been together so long, shared so much history, built this whole life. But standing there, Ryan felt something he hadn't felt in years. A crack in the foundation, a question he didn't want to ask. He lay down beside Lisa, careful not to wake her, and stared at the ceiling. The same ceiling he'd stared at for years. But tonight it looked different. Tonight everything looked different. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message from an unknown number. "Thanks for making a boring work event actually interesting. Sleep well, architect." Ryan stared at the message for a long moment. He should delete it. Should shut this down before it became anything. He knew that. Any reasonable person would know that. Instead, he saved the number and typed back. "Anytime. Good luck with the catalog." He put the phone down, heart racing like he'd just done something dangerous. Because maybe he had. Maybe that's exactly what he'd done. Outside, Seattle rain started falling against the windows. Ryan closed his eyes, but sleep didn't come easy. His mind kept wandering back to the gallery, to a woman he barely knew, to a conversation that had felt more real than anything he'd experienced in months. It was just one evening. Just one conversation. Nothing had happened. Nothing wrong. But Ryan knew something had shifted. Something small but significant, like the first crack in a dam. And he had no idea if he wanted to patch it up or watch it break wide open. The text came 3 days later. Ryan was at his desk, drowning in CAD drawings and revision requests, when his phone lit up. "Coffee? I'm trying to understand Seattle's obsession with it. Need a local guide." He stared at the message for a full minute. This was the moment. He could say he was busy, recommend a good cafe, keep things professional and distant. That's what he should do. That's what a person in a committed relationship would do. Pike Place Market. Tomorrow at 2. I'll show you the real Seattle coffee, not the tourist stuff. He sent it before he could change his mind. That night at dinner, Lisa talked about her day at the hospital where she worked as a nurse. Something about a difficult patient, about her coworkers' drama. Ryan nodded at the right moments, made appropriate sounds, but his mind was elsewhere. He felt like he was watching himself from outside his body, seeing a man going through the motions of his life. "You okay?" Lisa asked, touching his hand across the table. "You seem distracted lately." "Just work stuff," he lied. The ease with which the lie came out scared him a little. Big project deadline coming up. She accepted it because why wouldn't she? He'd never given her a reason not to trust him. 10 years of reliability, of being the steady one, the dependable one. 10 years of being exactly who she expected him to be. The next day, Ryan found himself checking his reflection 3 times before leaving the office. He told his team he had a site meeting. Another lie. They were coming easier now. Isabel was waiting at the market entrance, wearing jeans and a leather jacket, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked different from the gallery, more relaxed, more herself. "So," she said as they walked through the crowded market, "tell me why Americans are so obsessed with coffee that costs $7. Ryan laughed. "Because we've confused caffeine with personality." They ended up at a small shop tucked away from the main tourist area. The kind of place only locals knew about, with mismatched chairs and a barista who actually cared about the beans. They talked for 2 hours, their coffee going cold as the conversation flowed from topic to topic. Isabel told him about growing up in Lyon, about how she never felt like she belonged anywhere, so she decided to belong everywhere, about how she'd rather collect experiences than things, how she'd rather risk everything than risk nothing. "Don't you get tired?" Ryan asked. "Always moving, never settling." "Don't you get tired of never moving?" She countered, but there was no judgment in her voice, just curiosity. "You seem like someone who's been playing it safe for a long time." The observation hit harder than it should have. "Is that so obvious?" "Only because I used to be like that too," she said softly. "I had this whole life planned out. Safe job, safe relationship, safe everything. Then one day I woke up and realized I was building a beautiful prison for myself." "What changed?" "I did. I decided that being comfortable wasn't the same as being alive." She looked at him directly, and Ryan felt seen in a way he hadn't been in years. But that's just me. Some people are happy with comfortable. Nothing wrong with that. And if you're not sure which one you are, the question came out before he could stop it. Isabel smiled sadly. Then you're probably not as comfortable as you're pretending to be. They walked along the waterfront after, watching the ferries come and go. The conversation shifted to lighter things, but something had changed. A door had opened that neither of them was rushing to close. When Isabel's hand swung close to his as they walked, Ryan's fingers twitched with the urge to reach out. He didn't, but he thought about it. God, he thought about it. Same time next week? Isabel asked when they reached her car. Ryan knew he should say no, knew this was getting complicated, but looking at her, at the way the fading sunlight caught in her hair, at the smile that felt like it was just for him, he couldn't find the word. Yeah. Next week. Over the following month, their meetings became routine. Coffee on Tuesdays, lunch on Thursdays when his schedule allowed. A walk through the sculpture park on a surprisingly sunny Saturday when Lisa was working a double shift. Each time, Ryan told himself it was innocent. They were just friends. People had friends. Nothing was happening, but something was happening. He felt it in the way he caught himself thinking about Isabel during meetings. In the way he checked his phone constantly, hoping for her messages. In the way everything Lisa said seemed to grate on him now. Not because she'd changed, but because he had. One rainy Tuesday, they ended up at Isabel's temporary apartment when the cafe they'd planned to meet at was unexpectedly closed. It was a small studio in Capitol Hill, barely furnished because she never stayed anywhere long enough to make it feel like home. Sorry for the mess, she said, though the place was immaculate. I'm not used to having guests. They sat on her couch, a respectable distance between them, drinking wine she'd brought back from France. The rain hammered against the windows. The space felt intimate, private, like the rest of the world had disappeared. Can I ask you something? Isabel said after her second glass. And you can tell me it's none of my business. Okay, are you happy? Like really happy? Not comfortable? Not content? Actually happy? Ryan opened his mouth to say yes. The automatic response. The safe response. But sitting there in that moment of honesty, he couldn't. I don't know anymore, he admitted. I thought I was. For years I thought I was. But lately... He trailed off, unsure how to finish. Lately you've been wondering if you've been lying to yourself. Isabel finished for him. Yeah. She moved closer. Not much. Just enough that he could feel her warmth beside him. I'm not trying to complicate your life, she said quietly. I need you to know that. I'm not that person. I know. But I also can't pretend I don't feel this. Whatever this is, Ryan's heart was pounding. This was it. The moment where he could still walk away, still salvage everything, still be the good guy. I feel it too, he whispered. Isabel reached out, her fingers touching his face with a gentleness that made his breath catch. Then what do we do about it? Ryan didn't have an answer. So instead he closed the distance between them and kissed her. The next 6 weeks existed in a blur of stolen moments and carefully constructed lies. Ryan became someone he didn't recognize, someone who deleted text messages and cleared browser histories, someone who invented client meetings and site visits that didn't exist, someone who could look his girlfriend in the eye and lie without his voice shaking. It started small, an extra hour here, a late evening there. But like all secrets, it grew. It demanded more time, more deception, more of him. Afternoons at Isabel's apartment became his refuge. There, with the curtains drawn and the outside world locked away, he felt alive in a way he'd forgotten was possible. They'd spend hours talking, touching, existing in this bubble where consequences didn't exist, where he wasn't betraying anyone, where this was just two people finding something real. But reality has a way of seeping through even the strongest walls. Lisa noticed. Of course she noticed. You don't spend 10 years with someone without learning to read their silences. You're different lately, she said one night, folding laundry in their bedroom while Ryan scrolled through his phone, deleting another message from Isabel. Distant. Just stressed with work, he said. The same lie he'd been using for weeks. It was wearing thin. Maybe we should take a trip, Lisa suggested. and there was something desperate in her voice that made Ryan's stomach twist. "Remember that bed and breakfast in Oregon you always talked about? We could go next month. Reconnect. Next month. When Isabel would still be here. When this thing between them, whatever it was, would still be demanding his attention." "Yeah, maybe," Ryan said, non-committal. And he saw the hurt flash across Lisa's face before she hid it. They used to talk about everything. Used to stay up late sharing dreams and fears. Now they were roommates going through routines. And Ryan knew it was his fault. Knew he was killing something that had taken years to build. But knowing didn't stop him from meeting Isabel the next day. She was leaving in 6 weeks. That's what Ryan kept telling himself. 6 weeks and she'd go back to her nomadic life and he could figure out how to piece himself back together. 6 weeks and this would all be a memory. A moment of madness he'd eventually forget. Except he knew he wouldn't forget. Couldn't forget. "What happens when you leave?" he asked one afternoon, lying beside her in the tangled sheets of her bed. Rain drummed steadily against the windows, Seattle's endless soundtrack. Isabel traced patterns on his chest, her touch light and thoughtful. "I go to my next assignment, you go back to your life." Just like that? Just like that. But her voice carried a weight that suggested it wouldn't be that simple for either of them. "That's how this works." We both knew that from the beginning. Did they, though? Ryan wondered if he'd ever really understood what he was getting into. If he'd really thought through the cost of these borrowed hours. "Do you do this often?" he asked. "In all these cities you visit?" Isabel was quiet for a long moment. "You mean, do I make a habit of sleeping with taken men?" "No, this is different for me, too." "How?" She sat up, pulling the sheet around her. "Because usually I can keep it light. Fun, no strings, but with you." She looked at him, and there was something vulnerable in her expression he hadn't seen before. "With you, I keep forgetting to protect myself." The confession should have made Ryan feel better. Should have validated that this meant something, but instead it just made everything more complicated, more real, more destined to hurt people he cared about. His phone buzzed. A text from Lisa asking what he wanted for dinner. The guilt crashed over him like a wave. Here he was, in another woman's bed, while his girlfriend of 10 years planned their evening meal. What kind of person had he become? "I should go," he said, reaching for his clothes. "You always say that," Isabel noted, but she didn't try to stop him. She never did. "And you always come back." "Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe you shouldn't." She pulled on a robe and walked to the window, looking out at the gray Seattle afternoon. "I told you from the start I don't want to be the person who destroys your life." "You're not," Ryan said, but the words felt hollow. "I'm the one making these choices." "Are you, though? Or are you just running from choices you made years ago?" The observation cut deep because it was true. This thing with Isabel, it wasn't really about her, was it? It was about him, about the life he'd built without asking himself if it's what he actually wanted, about comfort versus passion, safety versus risk. That night, Ryan came home to find Lisa cooking his favorite meal. She'd lit candles, put on music. She was trying, and that made it so much worse. "I thought we could have a nice evening," she said, smiling too brightly. "Just us. No phones, no TV. Like we used to." They sat across from each other at their small dining table, and Ryan tried to be present, tried to engage. But every smile felt forced. Every response felt calculated. He was performing the role of boyfriend, and they both knew it. "Ryan," Lisa said finally, setting down her fork. "Talk to me. Really talk to me. What's going on with you?" He should have told her then, should have been honest, but instead he took the coward's way out. "I'm sorry. I know I've been distant. Work has just been overwhelming. The gallery project is more complex than we thought, and I've been staying late most nights trying to sort it out." "Is that really all it is?" Her eyes searched his face, looking for truth he wasn't willing to give. "Yeah, that's all." But Lisa wasn't stupid. She pulled out her phone and opened something, then slid it across the table. It was a receipt from a restaurant downtown, a place Ryan had never taken her. Date stamped for last Tuesday at 7 p.m. The same Tuesday he'd told her he was working late at the office. The blood drained from Ryan's face. "I found it in your jacket pocket when I was doing laundry," Lisa said, her voice eerily calm. "So let me ask you again. Is work really all that's going on?" The walls were closing in. The carefully constructed lies were crumbling. Ryan sat there, frozen, watching his life implode in real time. And he had no idea how to stop it. The silence that followed was deafening. Ryan stared at the receipt like it was evidence at a crime scene, which in a way it was. Evidence of his betrayal, his deception, his double life coming apart at the seams. "Well," Lisa's voice cracked, the calm facade breaking. "Say something. Lie to me again. Tell me it's nothing. Tell me I'm being paranoid." Ryan's mind raced, searching for an explanation that wouldn't destroy everything. But what was left to destroy? The moment that receipt appeared, it was over. He'd known it instantly. "Lisa," he started, but the words died in his throat. "Who is she?" Lisa asked, and now tears were streaming down her face. "Because there is a she, isn't there? I'm not stupid. I felt you pulling away for weeks. I just kept telling myself I was imagining it." The honest answer would have been merciful, quick. But Ryan fumbled through half-truths and minimizations first, making it worse. He said it wasn't serious, said it didn't mean anything, all the cliches that people use when they're caught, as if words could somehow soften the blade. "How long?" Lisa demanded. 6 weeks, Ryan whispered. 6 weeks. She laughed, but it was a broken sound. 6 weeks of lying to my face. 6 weeks of me thinking something was wrong with me. Wondering why you didn't want to touch me anymore. Why you flinched when I kissed you. God, I feel so stupid. You're not stupid. This isn't your fault. Then whose fault is it, Ryan? Because you seem to be suggesting it just happened. Like you tripped and fell into someone else's bed repeatedly for 6 weeks. The anger in her voice was better than the tears. Anger he could handle. Anger was clean. But when she started crying again, really sobbing, Ryan felt like the worst person alive. "Do you love her?" Lisa asked through tears. "I don't know," Ryan admitted, because even now, honesty felt important. "I don't know what I feel. Get out." Lisa's voice went cold. "Get out of my apartment. Get out of my life. Just get out. Lisa, please, can we just—" "No." She screamed it, and Ryan had never heard her scream before. Not in 10 years. "There's no we anymore. You destroyed that. You don't get to fix this. You don't get to explain it away. You just get to leave." Ryan stood there, shell-shocked, before mechanically gathering some clothes and his laptop. Each item he picked up felt surreal, like he was watching someone else's life fall apart. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't supposed to happen. The door closed behind him with a finality that echoed in his chest. He sat in his car for 20 minutes, hands shaking on the steering wheel before he finally drove to Isabel's apartment. Where else could he go? Not to friends. They were Lisa's friends too, and they'd rightfully hate him now. Not to his parents. He couldn't face them yet. Isabel opened the door in pajamas, surprised to see him at 10 p.m. on a weeknight. "She knows," Ryan said simply, and walked past her into the apartment. He told her everything. About the receipt, the confrontation, Lisa's tears being thrown out of his own home. Isabel listened quietly, her expression unreadable. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "I never wanted this to happen like this." "How did you think it would happen?" Ryan asked, and there was an edge to his voice he didn't try to hide. "We were having an affair. Someone was always going to get hurt. I know." Isabel sat beside him on the couch but didn't touch him. "But I also remember you telling me your relationship was already dying. That you were just going through the motions." "Maybe it was," Ryan admitted. "But that doesn't make this okay. Doesn't make what I did to her okay." They sat in silence. This wasn't how either of them imagined this playing out. The fantasy of their afternoon escapes had never included this part. The wreckage. The guilt. The reality. "What happens now?" Isabel asked. "I don't know. I need somewhere to stay. Just for a few days until I figure things out." "You can stay here," she offered. But Ryan heard the hesitation in her voice, because this changed everything. What they had lived in stolen hours, in the space between his real life Now that life had exploded and suddenly they were faced with something neither had prepared for. The affair in daylight. The secret out in the open. The next few days were brutal. Ryan's phone blew up with messages. Lisa's friends calling him every name in the book. His own friends asking what the hell was going on. His mother leaving a voicemail that started with, "I'm disappointed in you," and somehow got worse from there. He called in sick to work, unable to face the office. Unable to face anything. He stayed in Isabel's apartment, sleeping on her couch despite her offers of the bed, feeling like a ghost haunting someone else's life. Lisa blocked him on everything. He didn't blame her. He'd tried to call, tried to apologize properly, but she'd made it clear she never wanted to hear from him again. 10 years gone, just like that. What haunted him most was that he wasn't sure what he'd lost. Was he grieving Lisa or just the comfort of what they'd had? Did he miss her, or just the version of himself that existed in that relationship? On the 4th day, Isabel got a call. Ryan watched her face change as she listened, watched her eyes flick to him with something that looked like guilt. "That was my agency," she said after hanging up. "There's an opportunity in London. A major exhibition that needs immediate cataloging. They want me there in a week." "A week?" Ryan's heart sank. "But you still have a month left here." "I know. But this is huge for my career. The kind of project people wait years for." She sat beside him, took his hand. "I have to go, Ryan," and there it was. The truth he'd been avoiding. Isabel was never going to stay. This had an expiration date from the beginning, and they'd both known it. He just convinced himself it wouldn't matter, that somehow they'd figure it out. But there was no figuring this out. She had her life, her career, her nomadic existence. And he had, what? A blown-up relationship, disappointed friends and family, and nowhere to live. "Come with me," Isabel said suddenly, surprising them both. "What?" "Come to London. Start over. We could actually try this properly. See if it's real outside of whatever this was." Ryan looked at her. Really looked at her. She was beautiful, exciting, everything his old life wasn't. But was she his future or just his escape? "I can't," he said finally. "I have a job, a life here. And we both know this wasn't about you and me building something. This was about me running from something I wasn't brave enough to face." Isabel's eyes filled with tears. "So what was I? Just your midlife crisis?" "No, you were..." Ryan struggled to find words that would be honest without being cruel. "You were beautiful. What we had was beautiful. But it was never meant to last, was it?" She didn't answer. They both knew the truth. That night they said goodbye properly, not with the passion of their afternoons, but with something gentler, sadder. The acknowledgement that they'd given each other something important but temporary. A wake-up call. A question, but not an answer. When Isabel left for London 3 days later, Ryan didn't go to the airport. They'd said their goodbyes the night before, honest ones stripped of fantasy and pretense, and Ryan was left alone with the mess he'd created. The studio apartment Ryan found was nothing special. Small, barely furnished, in a neighborhood he didn't know, but it was his, and after everything that mattered. He needed space to figure out who he was when he wasn't trying to be what someone else needed. The first few weeks were the hardest. He'd wake up reaching for Lisa, forgetting for a moment that she was gone, that he'd destroyed that. Other times, he'd check his phone expecting messages from Isabel before remembering she was halfway across the world, living her life like he'd always been just a temporary stop on her journey. Work became his refuge. He threw himself into projects, staying late not because he was lying about it anymore, but because going home to an empty apartment felt too heavy. His colleagues noticed but didn't ask. Office gossip had already spread the basics of what happened, and people either pitied him or judged him. Sometimes both. His boss called him in one afternoon. Ryan braced himself for a lecture, maybe even a firing. Instead, she told him about her own divorce 10 years ago, about mistakes she'd made, about the work it took to forgive herself. "I'm not excusing what you did," she said, "but I am saying you're not the first person to mess up their life, and you won't be the last. The question is what you do now." Ryan started therapy the following week. He'd resisted the idea at first, seeing it as something broken people did. Then he realized that's exactly what he was. Broken, or at least bent in ways that needed straightening out. His therapist, Dr. Chen, was a middle-aged woman who didn't let him get away with his own stories. When Ryan tried to explain the affair as just something that happened, she stopped him. "Things don't just happen," she said. "You made choices. A lot of choices. So let's talk about why." Over the following months, Ryan started unpacking the truth he'd been avoiding. That he'd been unhappy for years but too scared to admit it. That he'd stayed in a comfortable relationship because comfort felt like love, or at least close enough. That he'd blamed Lisa for the emptiness he felt when really, he'd never asked himself what he actually wanted. Isabel wasn't the problem or the solution, Dr. Chen said one session. She was a mirror. She showed you that you'd been sleepwalking through your life. But I hurt people to figure that out, Ryan said. Lisa didn't deserve that. She didn't do anything wrong. No, she didn't. And you can carry that guilt forever, or you can learn from it. Make different choices moving forward. Become someone who faces their problems instead of running from them. It sounded simple when she said it. It wasn't. Ryan tried to reach out to Lisa once, about 6 months after everything fell apart. Not to ask for forgiveness or reconciliation, just to apologize properly, to acknowledge what he'd done without excuses or explanations. She responded with a short message. Thanked him for the apology, said she was doing better, moving on with her life, that she hoped he'd find whatever he was looking for. Then she made it clear she didn't want further contact. It was closure, but it hurt like fresh wound. His mom called every Sunday. At first, the conversations were stiff and awkward. She was disappointed in him, and she didn't hide it. But slowly, as he started being honest about his struggles, about therapy, about trying to become better, she softened. "I raised you to be honest and kind," she said one Sunday. "You forgot that for a while. Just don't forget it again." "I'm trying," Ryan promised. "I know you are. That's something." Work on the gallery finished. Ryan found himself standing in the completed space one evening after everyone else had left. The same space where he'd met Isabel nearly a year ago. Where everything had started. It looked beautiful. The old ceiling preserved. The new lighting complementing rather than competing. A blend of history and present which felt somehow fitting. His phone buzzed. A message from Isabel. They didn't talk often, but every few months one of them would reach out. Just checking in. Making sure the other was okay. Saw photos of the gallery. "Beautiful work. How are you?" Ryan looked around the empty space before responding. "I'm okay. Actually okay, not just saying it. Learning a lot about myself. Most of it uncomfortable. How's London?" "Amazing and exhausting. Met someone. It's early but feels good, healthy, real." Ryan felt a pang but also something else. Relief maybe. That they could both move forward. "That's great. Really. You deserve that. So do you. Be patient with yourself, architect." He smiled at the old nickname and pocketed his phone. The truth was, Ryan was still figuring things out. He'd started dating again, tentatively. Nothing serious. He wasn't ready for serious, but he was learning to be honest. To tell people what he actually wanted instead of just going along with what seemed expected. He'd learned that comfort and happiness weren't the same thing. That you could build a whole life around avoiding risk and call it stability when really, you were just afraid to want more. He'd learned that hurting people didn't make you a monster, but what you did after mattered. That you couldn't undo your mistakes, but you could choose not to repeat them. Most importantly, he'd learned that he'd rather be alone and authentic than partnered and pretending. That the person he needed to be honest with first was himself. On the anniversary of meeting Isabel, Ryan stood on the waterfront where they'd walked together. The same ferries came and went, carrying people to their lives. Seattle rain fell softly, constant and familiar. He thought about that night at the gallery, about the man he'd been, sleepwalking through his comfortable life. That man felt like a stranger now, someone he'd known but never really understood. The affair had broken him open in ways he'd needed but hadn't asked for. It hadn't made him happy, hadn't solved his problems, but it had woken him up, forced him to face questions he'd been avoiding for years. What did he actually want? Who did he want to be? What kind of life was worth living? He still didn't have all the answers, but at least now he was asking the questions, living in them. Building something new from the wreckage of what he'd destroyed. His phone rang. A friend inviting him to dinner. Normal stuff. Simple stuff. The kind of everyday moment that used to feel boring but now felt like solid ground. "Yeah," Ryan said, turning away from the water. "I'll be there." And he walked forward one step at a time toward whatever came next. Not running from anything, not chasing anything, just moving forward, eyes open, heart learning to be honest. It wasn't the ending he'd imagined when this all started. But maybe eventually it could be the beginning of something better, something real, something true. That would have to be enough.